In this video, I'm going to break down my process for mixing acoustic guitars. Before we get started, my name is Ed, you're watching Stokes Sounds, and if you like this video, please make sure that you hit the like button, subscribe and leave a comment. And if you want to support the channel, head over to our website, stokesounds.com, where you will see we have vocal presets, mixing templates, masterclasses, as well as a Stokes Sound podcast. Let's take a listen to the acoustic guitars that we're working with. When it comes down to processing, I always think of it, there's two sides to it. You've got more of like a percussive element acoustic guitar and then more of like a singer-songwriter acoustic guitar. So in like a dense mix, I would treat more of an acoustic guitar as a percussive element as I would do in a singer-songwriter track. But in this case, it was a little bit more of a singer-songwriter style. So I wanted to keep the body there of the bottom end of the acoustic guitar a little bit more than I would do if it was in like a band track and the acoustic guitar was just adding groove. So we've got three separate guitar tracks here. We've got acoustic left, right, and a noodle. Sometimes I will double up the acoustic guitar, so I'll have one on the left, one on the right doing exactly the same thing. In this case, I had both the guitars doing the same thing, but with the right one being a different inversion to the left one, which created harmony within the chords, and it just made a nicer sound for this arrangement. But there are multiple ways of doing it, and you just got to do what you like. So if we take a look at how I processed it, I send all of these three guitar tracks to one acoustic guitar group. Sometimes I will process individual tracks, but because it was the same guitar with the same mic, same player, I just decided that it was all okay to bus process everything as one. So if we take a look at what I'm doing to process them, first up, I've got the virtual mix rack by Slate, and this is basically like my channel strip. So I'm doing some analog emulation, some EQ, some compression, and then I've got a trimmer plugin on the end just because of the compressor. It was giving me a little bit of gain, so I wanted to dial it back a little bit just for my gain staging, so I'm not tricked by plugins being louder and sounding better when actually they're maybe doing harm. So, you know, not all the time, but I just like to keep the volumes the same before and after when using the plugins. First up here, I'm doing some analog saturation. I decided to go for the Brit 4KE. This is the SSL kind of sound. Because it's an acoustic song, I wanted to kind of create it quite organic and have that analog sound, so I felt like having some SSL sound on the acoustic guitars gave it a nice pleasant tone. Then I went into a EQ. In this case, it's the Neve EQ. I love Neve EQs on guitars, and here I'm just kind of shaping the guitar tone. So I'm doing some brightness at 2.5 dB, and I believe it's around a 15K shelf. So it's just lifting up the top end, giving me some air in the acoustic. Then I'm doing some 1.6K boost at nearly 2 dB, and that's just giving me some definition. So in this case, there was some strumming and some picking, and I just wanted to get that out in the mix, and around that 1.6K gave me that definition. And then I'm doing a boost at 220 Hertz, and this is just giving me the body of the acoustic guitar. I don't always boost at 220, but I did in this case just because there wasn't really many other instruments within this song. So, you know, if it's more of a percussive element guitar, I definitely probably wouldn't add 220 Hertz in, just because it would be too bottom end, too heavy, and it would just muddy up the mix. But in this case, I decided to add it because it sounded nice. And then I did a high pass filter at around 90 Hertz. I just didn't need it. It's all of the bottom end rumble that's just not needed, so I took it out. Then I go into the Distressor compressor. I absolutely love this compressor. It's very punchy and powerful, which is why you will see I've got it in parallel on the mix. I could have taken the input gain down, but I decided that I liked the sound of the gain reduction that I was getting on the compressor, so I just decided to use it in parallel instead. Just standard 3-to-1, doing a high pass filter as well, because I don't want the bottom end of the acoustic affecting the compressor. It just sounded better to me in this case, so I used it. And then, as mentioned, I'm using the trimmer just to control the gain staging. So if we listen to this plugin with it off and then with it on, you'll see what it's doing. It's just shaping the guitars, adding some overall brightness, cleaning it up, and it's just creating a really nice pleasant tone. Then after that plugin, I then go into some EQ, decided to use the FabFilter Pro Q for this, and this is where I do my subtractive EQ. I felt like there were some resonant frequencies in certain parts that were just sticking out a little bit too much to me. So if we take a look at the frequencies that I'm taking out, if you're listening in studio headphones or monitors, you'll hear those frequencies. They're just poking out a little bit too much and we're sounding a little bit unpleasant. So if we listen to that off and on, It's just controlling those frequencies within the mix. Again, they were poking out a little bit too much for my ears, so I just wanted to control them, and I just took them out slightly on this EQ. Then I go into my final EQ, which is one of my favorite EQs, is the Pulsec EQ. This one is the UAD version, and I'm just using this to add some brightness at 10K, 3.5 dB. So if we listen with this off and on, you'll see what it's doing. To me, this plugin is adding a lot. It's giving me that kind of warm vintage tone sound and giving me that really nice smooth brightness as mentioned. So I love this plugin on acoustics. Then after that, I go into some reverb, just to give me some space, and I'm using the Abbey Road plates. So if we listen with it off and on, you'll see what it's doing. Then I'm going to exaggerate it so you'll really hear that reverb sound. I went for a plate reverb. It's got a bit more of a brighter tone to it, and I just felt like because I added brightness on the guitar, it kind of went really nicely to have a plate reverb with the acoustic guitar. I could have used a Hall. There's so many reverbs out there, but I just love the Abbey Road plate, so I just decided to go with it. And then I've got an EQ followed after the reverb, and that's just doing some filtering, high pass and low pass, just controlling the reverb. I've mentioned before, I don't really like too much bottom end, and I don't like too much brightness in reverb. It can really change the way the reverb sounds, and I want it to sound really nice. So I EQ the reverb to how I see fit with the acoustic guitar. You notice I took low end out on the acoustic guitar, so I definitely don't want low end in the reverb because it will just muddy up the mix. And so that's why I didn't EQ after the reverb. And that's it. That's how I process acoustic guitars. If you enjoyed this video, please do make sure that you hit the like button and leave a comment with any questions. I will answer them all, and I'll see you all again next week for another video.